Hi, I'm Sydney,
And I'm Jake.
and you're listening to Two for the Matinee. It's not the worst movie.
Today we'll be talking about Godfather Part 3 and how we would have done it differently.
It's not the worst movie, but it's the worst of the Godfather movies.
Okay, so you were telling me about your obsession with The Godfather at a young age.
Yeah, I really love that movie. It kind of just struck a nerve with me when I was about 11. And I was so obsessed with it that my mom got tired of me watching it on the VCR in the family room. So they bought me a VCR for my bedroom so that I could watch the movie away from them.
Is there anything specific or a character you identified with?
I don't know. I think I just like crime. I think that planted the seed for my love of crime movies and like epic stories like that.
Yeah, but these movies aren't very crime filled. There's like long stretches of things that aren't criminal.
That is true.
I mean, I remember distinctly as a kid. I don't remember how old I was, but watching the second one with my parents, and that's the story about Vito's origin putting me to sleep.
Okay, so I'm not talking about the second one. I didn't see that one until I was a lot older. I only watched the first one over and over again.
And okay, and you weren't curious about the other ones?
I was 11. I don't even think I knew there was a Godfather Part 2.
Well, when your parents bought you the VCR, they should have bought you the second one too.
I don't think I would have appreciated the second one at that age. I think that's something. I think I was too into the violence and the crime family dynamics. I think the second one's more cerebral.
Have you read the book?
Yes, I have, of course, when I was like 11. Let me tell you, I probably should have had better supervision as a child because that's not a kid's book.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've always been curious how the book compares to the movie. If there's one thing I found about on this viewing, and one thing I've noticed is like every time I watch it, my expectations or my sort of evaluation of it changes. One of the things that struck me about watching it this time that I didn't feel about watching it last time was that there's a lot of confusing stuff in it that didn't quite make sense.
Are we talking about Godfather Part 3 or Godfather
I
Part
mean,
1?
even part one.
But we're not here to talk about Godfather Part 1. We're here to talk about Godfather Part 3.
Right. But they're all connected. Like, well, before we get into what part 3 was, I think we should briefly maybe talk about what it was supposed to be. And there's a script out there that I haven't read from like 1980, maybe, or is it 89, that's floating around. That was I think the more intended version that included Duvall. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I didn't know there was a script floating around, but I knew that the story was supposed to revolve around Tom Hagen and Michael and their relationship.
Right. You know that they were Puzo and Coppola started writing a fourth one, and then Puzo died.
I saw there was a fourth one that would have the same trajectory as Godfather 2, with like the story of Vincent, played by Andy Garcia, in Godfather 3, and then the story of Sonny as a boy. I think he was supposed to be played by DiCaprio, and that would sort of follow the same parallel stories that they had in Godfather Part 2.
So my understanding is, well, this is why we can't get into 3 yet until we talk about the way that 2 ends and sort of the character arc of Michael, because it feeds into 3 and what's wrong with 3. And so Michael's character arc is sort of the inverse of the hero's journey, where like the traditional hero's journey is you have a person that's flawed, that goes on some quest, learns something about themselves that makes them a better person, and then comes back and sort of saves the day. Here you have the inverse, where Michael starts out as a good guy, and then over the course of the story, he gets corrupted. He gets a taste for the dark side, and he embraces it. It's sort of like, to some extent, it's the story of Anakin Skywalker, right?
I don't know if gangster stories, though, are the hero's journey. I think that's its own. The gangster story is the rise and fall story.
And so the hero's is the fall and then rise.
I guess, yeah. So in general, like I feel, it's maybe the inverse of the hero story, but it's the genre trope of the gangster story.
Yeah, I guess that's probably true. I'm trying to think if there's like, are there any gangster stories with happy endings? Nothing that
No,
we've watched recently, right?
no, they're all rise and falls from the beginning of the gangster story in the 30s with Little Caesar and Scarface, Bonnie and Clyde, which is more of a, the new age of gangster movies, rise and fall, Godfather, rise and fall.
So Scarface with Al Pacino, it's interesting. I'm trying to remember how that starts out. He doesn't really start out as a good guy though, right?
Well, I don't think they have to be a good guy. It's just a rise and fall story. They're not ever crouches like these are good people.
But I think what's interesting about The Godfather is that Michael is a good person. I mean, I think that's part of his downfall is he has this sort of hubris in the beginning. One is like he has that line where he's very honest with Kay and he's telling her about like what his dad does and what his family does. And then he says, Kay, I'm not my father, right? And I'm not going to this business. And he hasn't done anything bad at that point. And then you have the flashback at the end of the second one, right? To like when the war started, he tells the family that he's going to enlist, which again, it's like a very altruistic act. And you contrast that with, they talk about how Vito thanks the armies for saps and suckers. So it seems like he does start out as a good guy. And his motivation initially is good. He's like, families first. I love my family. I want to protect my father. And so he, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. He goes down this road trying to protect his father. Then it escalates to getting revenge for his father. And then he
replaces his father.
And again, we don't know the full story of Vito. So it's hard to compare about who's done more evil acts. But I think 2 ends with Michael sort of, he's eliminated all his enemies. Like his wife hates him.
He's killed his brother. He's alienating Tom.
And his kids. So 3, I guess, was initially supposed to be a setup where Tom Hagen is kind of like the conscience of the family that leads the 2 of them into conflict over the control of the family. But that did not happen because Duvall claims that they were giving Al Pacino like 5 times his salary and he thought it was unfair.
Well, Duvall also said, and I think other people have said they were doing it for the money. And so he's like, if I'm going to do it for the money, you should give me some money.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because the quote I read is like, 2 times, 3 times, that's fine. But like 5 times my salary, that's not fair.
Yeah, I saw that too. Yeah.
And so my problem with the third one, it feels like it's almost like they missed a step because in the third one, Michael's like this, he's older. I think they make him look older, right?
So wait, so before we get into this, let's talk about what we liked about it.
Okay. I mean, I have a lot that I like about it. I mean, I think the whole sequence with the opera at the end, and then also all the little threads and the loose ends being tied up. I mean, I think it just looked beautiful and it worked really, really well.
I mean, we're going to disagree with you about that final scene, but we can get into that later.
What do you mean by the final scene?
The whole opera and the interweaving of the murders and the opera.
Oh, you didn't like that?
But that goes to a whole nother issue I have. But I will save that. I liked Andy Garcia's performance. I liked how I felt Michael was mostly a consistent character. That Michael from Godfather 2 becoming this Michael in Godfather 3.
That's where I disagree. Right.
There were like little glimmers where I was like, okay, so this is the same Michael. This is the Michael after many years. The characters I liked the most though were Connie Corleone and Al Neri. For some reason, they were just my favorites because I think there was so much more potential for them in this movie, and they were consistent through the other films as well. So, and I'll get into why I like that later. And I liked Eli Wallach's character as well. I don't think you would be eating a cannoli like that in the middle of an opera, but other than that, I liked his character. And I did like the theme of this one, which was sort of sin, atonement, and redemption, and Michael's sort of need for that. Those were the things I liked about it.
It's funny because like Like all those things I didn't like for one
Really?
reason or another. But the things I liked is I like the sequence, the opera juxtaposed with the different murders. I like that. I like the music in it. I like the music in all of them, but I like the
Yeah,
music in this one.
I like the music too.
And I've always been a fan of Joe Montana, and I was kind of disappointed that he got killed off. But I kind of liked his character, and I wish he was developed more. And the other thing that I think is kind of funny is I like the fact that this movie has two lines that are so quotable and have been referenced so much. One because it's so good, and the other one is because it's so bad. And the good line is, just when I thought it was out, they pull me back in. It's like, but he's your first cousin, then I love him first, right? It's like the worst line ever. And then the other one's like the greatest line ever. And this movie has both of them, which I think is just wonderful.
Oh, that's funny.
All right. Well, having said that, now we can talk about why we disagree on the things we like. So you said you didn't like the opera sequence.
No,
Why is that?
because I felt getting to that point was so convoluted. I didn't even know why half of those people were dying.
I agree. But that's not the fault of the opera sequence. It's the fault of everything before the opera
Right.
sequence.
But I felt like for me, it did not have the same impact as those other movies' final sort of climax of murders.
Right.
You know, because I don't know. I'm like good old pope, new pope, bad pope, good pope, archbishop, Swiss banker. I don't even know what these people are doing, who they are. They're interchangeable to me. And I just think that whole thread, I hated it. The whole Vatican Bank thing. I felt like that could have been done differently and better.
Well, for the longest time, I thought it was preposterous. And then I found out that it was based on an actual Vatican banking scandal of like the early 80s.
Which I know that, but the way that story is probably just as confusing.
Right. I mean, the way I understand it, sort of high level, is that there is this conspiracy of like was it the Archbishop? Is that the Irish guy? Is he an Archbishop? I don't know what these titles are.
I think he's
like
the Archbishop, yeah.
Yeah, the Archbishop and some bankers, they basically wanted to use Michael to get his money and then kill him off, right? And so that was kind of what was happening in the background. And he obviously realized this, and he took care of business. So you said you liked Eli Wallach's character. See, my problem with his character is in this movie, he's supposed to be this real close friend of the family, but I don't think like he didn't exist in the other two, right?
No, I don't remember him at all.
It was
but
just really...
I think the thing is, because this movie has a lot of bad acting in it.
Yeah.
I liked his character because I liked his scenes with Talia Shire, because the strongest acting in this movie comes from Talia Shire, Pacino, I think, and Andy Garcia.
So I guess, yeah, I mean, Eli Wallach, he's great in everything. And I guess it's not really my problem with him or his characters. The fact that it was really jarring about the way they talked about him and how close he was to the family and how they always come to him. But like, we'd never seen this guy before.
Right.
And so again, I don't know like what happened in the books, if they invented this for the story, this guy for the story or what, but it was just that. And with Andy Garcia's character, my problem was, so the sort of the first half of the movie, they like stress the fact that he's Sonny's son, and he has these like outbursts, this very Sonny like temper outbursts. And then suddenly, when Michael's like, "You're going to be the new Godfather," it's like a switch goes off, and he's just like calm, cool, and collected.
I agree 100%. I didn't say I liked his character; I liked his performance. Yeah. I liked what he was doing with what he was given, but his character makes no sense to me because of the exact thing that you said. He went from Sunny Light to this weird, like low-key Michael person, and it didn't make any sense. And it had no motivation. There was a lot of really poorly drawn characters in this movie. And there were characters that appeared and then disappeared and you never saw them again. So what was the point of them being there? Like Bridget Fonda.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you cast Bridget Fonda, who at the time, like she was hot, right? At that point, like early 90s.
Yeah. What's going on?
She's like this little like side piece for 5 minutes.
Yeah. So there was Tom's son. Why do we need him for? Who cares? Like there's just a lot of dead ends characters in this. And I think the movie's too long. It's got too many characters in it. And it's got too many characters that aren't developed.
Which makes me wonder about this new cut that he released. because I mean, I don't know what was left on the editing room floor, like what the deleted scenes were, but I know, for example, in Godfather Part II, so when Michael's in Sicily and one of his bodyguards betrays him and puts a car bomb or
Yeah.
puts the bomb in the car. So I was kind of I understood what happened, but I was sort of confused about how Brazzini got to him or why this guy did it. But apparently there's a deleted scene where we later see that this bodyguard's in New York. Brazzini's giving him a pizza parlor. So he's running this pizza parlor, and I think Michael blows it up or something. And so with Part II, I wish they'd left that in because I think it would have added to sort of explaining some of this. And so I wonder with 3 whether there was more deleted scenes with Tom's son or Bridget Fonda's character that would have made more sense.
Well, the lowdown on the Godfather, what was it called? The Godfather Coda, the death of Michael Corleone, is that it's actually shorter. And they only changed the ending and the beginning and maybe shaved some scenes and moved some stuff around.
Do you know what they changed about the beginning and ending?
No. Oh, the ending, yeah. So at the ending where Michael falls out the chair and dies, he doesn't fall out the chair. He just sits in the chair and it fades out while he's still in the chair.
Okay. I mean, I thought the beginning was fine because it kind of went with the pattern of all 3 of them start off with a big party, right? So I assume, I don't know, maybe they changed that beginning scene where he's getting the cross of St. Christopher or whatever it is.
I don't know. You can see the new ending on YouTube if you want to see it. I mean, it's nothing remarkable.
And so, well, you mentioned this is, what did you say, a story of redemption?
Well, I mean, it's a quest. It's a quest for redemption.
So, and I guess for me, that's sort of the biggest thing that's problematic. Not that you couldn't have a Godfather movie with Michael trying to redeem himself, but it just seemed like such a big jump from where 2 ends. And I feel like if you were to extrapolate Godfather 1 and 2 into the future, I picture him as Satan and the devil's advocate, right? And so I feel like there's a step missing where he diverts from that path and is now seeking forgiveness and redemption, and he feels guilty about killing his brother, and he feels guilty about estranging his wife and the way he treated his kids and this and that. It just kind of, if you watch 2 and 3 back to back, it's just out of nowhere, right? There's they missed a step.
But it's also how many years later?
Yeah, I mean, chronologically, he had time for that.
I mean, he's an old man now, and old people think about things differently.
That's true. I mean,
just not even as there needs to be a catalyst, just because age is a catalyst.
Well, see, now that, so I had 2 ideas about how this movie should have been different, but now I have a 3rd idea. And it could have been interesting if, and maybe technically, I don't know how they would have done this, but with 2, the way that jumps between the story of Michael and Vito, 3 could have potentially jumped between Michael seeking redemption and Michael going from evil guy to a place where he can seek redemption.
So with flashbacks.
Yeah.
So have Michael in those years that we don't see him, and then Michael at the end.
Yeah.
Okay. I could see that.
And then actually, if done effectively, I feel like those 2 stories would end in a very powerful place, because the flashback story sort of ends on this high note. Michael's now at a place where 3 begins, where he wants redemption and forgiveness. But now we see how that plays out. He ends up dying alone, and he isn't. It's still a tragedy. He isn't able to achieve that, and I think that could have been very strong.
Yeah, but then you have the problem of recasting Michael as a young person when we've seen young Michael in 2 other movies, so that becomes a problem. And there's no de-aging in 1990. Thank God.
Well, that's the other thing about Andy Garcia, and I remember hearing this on a podcast. They were talking about Andy Garcia, and I mean, I was too young, but I guess when he was coming up, people saw him as sort of the new Al Pacino. And I think if you watch his performance here and watch some of his earlier performances, it almost seems like he's doing an Al Pacino. There's, I don't know,
I don't know if I think he's doing an Al Pacino, but I think he gives me the same energy.
Yeah, except the difference between Andy Garcia and Al Pacino is for whatever reason, I don't know what it is, but there's like something missing with Andy Garcia where it didn't work out for him. Yeah, he's missing that whatever that Al Pacino has. Because like,
but he was the best part of Black Rain.
yeah, maybe as the number 2. I mean, like, and we're talking about 3, but I have to go back to 1 and 2. Like, one of my favorite movies in like cinema, or one of my favorite scenes in like cinema that I've seen, is when Michael comes back with the gun in the cafe before he kills Sollozzo and the chief of police.
When he sits back down at the table.
That's just that. It's kind of like in that article you sent me about Mitchum. It's like, while other actors act, he's just still, and you just watch him, and it's just his face, and it's hot, his eyes, and you can see it's like the wheels in his mind are turning, and he's like deciding, is he going to do this or not going to do this? And you just see it in his eyes, and he's not yelling. He's just kind of looking down, looking at them. That's maybe my favorite moment in the movies. I don't know. Andy Garcia is not quite there. So I gave you one option for how I would have redone Godfather 3. What do you got for me?
Well, number 1, get Tom Hagen back. I would have gone with that initial story of Tom and Michael having conflict. But what I also would have done is, we got a Sonny problem here, is that they give us Sonny's bastard kid in Vincent, but Sonny has another kid. He got baptized at the end of Godfather Part 1. Where's that son? So I would like to see, what I would have done, I think, is I would have brought Tom Hagen back into the story. I would have also had him on a collision course with Michael, but I would also have Tom being sort of this father figure to Vincent, while there's also the other kid, Sonny's other legitimate kid, coming up in the ranks with the family. So I would also have those two people meeting in conflict, and then Michael choosing one, Tom backing one, and then that becomes like an intergenerational thing.
That's actually really great. And if you kind of think about the fact that Tom isn't like a biological brother, he's sort of adopted and he's the outsider, you see why like he would gravitate to the bastard son, right? And Michael would choose like the real son, because Michael's like very traditional,
right?
Well, that also brings up like what happened to Connie's kids.
Yeah, who knows?
Well, along those lines, I had 2 other ideas. So, and they kind of stem from themes that came up in 1 and 2. And one of the themes in 2 is when he's in Sicily, him and his bodyguards are kind of walking through the countryside, and they get to this town where it's like basically deserted. And Michael asks, well, what happened here? And he's like, oh, well, all the men are dead because of vendettas. And I thought like I was expecting that to be a theme that was more developed. Like the whole thing of like an eye for an eye leaves everyone blind. And, you know, if you keep pursuing your enemies and your enemies pursuing you, like everyone ends up dead. And it never felt paid off. And I felt like that should have been part of the tragedy of Michael. And this other idea of his going back to his hubris at the end of 1 and 2, where he's like, if he thinks if he kills all his enemies, he's going to be like the last man standing, and there's going to be no one above him, and he's going to be the only one at the top. So kind of given those 2 themes, I was thinking like one thing you could potentially have is Kay mentions that there's something wrong with Anthony. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Which they never explain. But like one idea I had is like, what if Anthony was like, I don't know, he was like killing animals or something. Like this kid was like a little sociopath. And so Michael then has to confront the son that's like even more evil than himself.
I don't know about that one.
The other idea I had is Fredo. I mean, he was like sleeping around with like all these like showgirls or whatever. I was thinking instead of Sonny's son, maybe like Fredo had an illegitimate son who A, wants a piece of the pie, 2, wants revenge for his dad. And he's sort of like, he's almost like a Michael, but he's worse, right? He's like Michael to the nth degree.
Or he's just like Fredo.
Well, that's boring. he's just a loser. No, but just like this, he'd be sort of the opposite of Fredo, right? He'd be like actually smart and devious, and he would maybe turn some of the people that are left in Michael's life against him, like Connie and
I
his
like, yeah,
kids.
yeah. So Connie has said twice that she doesn't think Michael killed Fredo.
Does she actually believe
But
that?
that's the question I had. Does she believe
Right.
that, or is that something she's telling us, telling herself? Because I mean, he killed your husband.
I don't know.
So that is something that actually could get explored too. Maybe Connie really doesn't believe that he had nothing to do with it.
Right. So, and if you have this the Fredo's son character, I mean, he would be in the best position to like turn Connie against Michael. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it would have been nice to see Michael realize two things. One is there's always gonna be someone stronger than you or better or smarter than you, right? It's like athletics. Like, yeah, you're at the top for a while, but there's always gonna be someone better. So he thinks he's like, I've killed all my enemies, like no one can hurt me.
But the calls are coming from inside the house.
Right. And then the other thing is you kind of see it's like all of this is a cycle of tragedies and these vendettas. And so Michael's at top at this point, but then something comes along and dethrones him and continues the cycle, and then that person gets bumped off, etc. So like I think they should have played up the themes that they started with.
Yeah, because Connie's kind of a train wreck in Godfather Part 2.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we come back and she's like super pious, devoted sister.
Right. And the fact that she went on this bender between, well, deep inside, I'm sure she still has some resentment about the fact that Michael killed her husband.
Oh, yeah.
And we know that she can sort of flip flop about her feelings about her brother. So if she went from being this pious sister to turning on Michael, like that wouldn't surprise me.
But also, Connie's got to have some internal conflict as well about the role that her husband played in getting her brother Sonny killed. So she's got two things going on there.
Yeah, I mean, that's another question. Like, does she not believe that Michael killed Fredo? Does she not believe that Carlo set up Sonny's death?
See, Connie's an interesting character, and I feel like she was not given her due in that third movie.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, Coppola's like made some really great films, but I feel like, I don't know.
I mean, my question is, did this movie need to be made? And my
Third
answer
one,
is
no, it
yeah.
didn't.
And my answer is
money.
yeah. And my answer is no. You should have just left it alone. Because also there is also that elephant in the room, which is Mary Corleone, Sofia Coppola. And she just, the air completely goes out of any scene that she's in because she's just not good.
And I still don't believe it. Like on Wikipedia, I was reading about how I guess they were screen testing all these actresses, and like for whatever reason they didn't fit, or there was some scheduling conflict. So he just like gave up. He's like, fine, I'll just cast my daughter. Like I have a hard time believing that.
I have a hard time believing that too. I'm like, in my mind, I'm thinking of all the people that could have, hell, Bridget Fonda, dye her hair black.
Right. I mean, I felt bad for the people to act opposite her.
I know that, and they did such a good job. And I'm just like, oh damn, Pacino, she's giving you nothing. And Andy Garcia's like here, like crying. I'm like, you're really good because she's giving you nothing to work with.
And I mean, speaking of her and Garcia, like their love story, the way they set up the plot, it was required sort of, but it was a little weird. Like, really? You fall in love with your cousin?
Yeah, we didn't need the cousin incest, the cousin loving. That also could have gotten...
Again, unless, like, if the first or second one had, like, somebody at some point marry their cousin and this thing happened in the family before, so they're like, oh, this happens in the family sometimes. All right, like, maybe I'll suspend my disbelief. But it's like, of all the people, it's just... it's like they worked backwards.
And I didn't buy it either. Maybe if it had been Winona Ryder, I would have bought it. But I didn't. What was the attraction? There was like nothing there.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been more interesting if Vincent was more sociopathic and he was only interested in her because she was Michael Corleone's daughter. He didn't actually love her. Like, that'd be more interesting than this weird, like,
yeah,
this fake love affair that they
because he's trying to covet everything that Michael has, which would have been way better. His position, his daughter, his sister, his affection of his sister. Oh yeah, that would have been way better.
Yeah, and he's got a chip on his shoulder because he's the illegitimate son of this guy who probably has a bunch of other illegitimate children.
Yeah.
So
Sonny.
So Vincent could have been an interesting foil as well.
Mm-hmm. Bada boom, bada beep, bada boom.
So those are our thoughts. We'd love to hear what other people think and how they would have changed it.
So if you had to describe this movie in one word, how would you describe it?
Cannoli.
Mine's flat. Just like I was thinking of bread that didn't rise.
Matzah.
It's matzah. Yeah, it's unleavened bread.
Yeah. Kind of dry and flavorless.
Yeah, and it's sad. It's just maybe this one everyone should have taken a pass. Our mediocrity scale of 1 to 4. What do you give this one?
I think if it was shorter, I would give it a 3. But I was also trying to figure some of the plot out. Is what I was also looking up on my phone. And also if it made more sense, I would have given it a 3. But I have to give it a 2 out of 4.
Yeah, I looked at my phone. I checked Twitter a couple times. And I also looked up cast stuff as well.
Yeah.
And then I only watched half of it. And then I watched the other half the next day. Because it is long. It's like 3 hours. And I felt those 3 hours.
I don't regret watching it. I think it had enough good things for me that I probably will rewatch it again at some point. I mean, this is probably the 3rd time I've seen it. So
And I probably won't revisit it. It was not compelling enough for me.
So you give it a 1?
I can still no, it's not a 1's like the worst of the worst.
So you give it a 2-, and maybe I give it a 2+.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 2-.
All right. Shall we play our game?
Ready, go.
Anne Baxter.
Oh, geez. Anne Baxter, what was she in that we watched?
Good question. Let's see. The Magnificent Amber.
Oh, that's right. Okay, ready?
Yeah.
Jeez. Go.
I got it in 6.
Oh my God, no.
Bam! Just like that. That's all there is to it, Dustin. That's all there is to it. A winner. Just like that.
So I went Anne Baxter to Cotton. What's his first name?
Joseph Cotton.
To Orson Welles. I actually went with a third man. To Tom Selleck, because Orson Welles was the voice of the novelist in Magnum P.I., whose house he was living in.
Okay.
Does that count?
Yes, we said film or television.
And then Tom Selleck was in Mr. Baseball with the Japanese actor.
Oh yeah, from the Yakuza.
Yeah. What's his name?
Takada, Kid Takada.
Yeah. And he was with Andy Garcia in Black
Rain. Oh, yeah, I forgot Andy. Oh, I can never remember. There's so many things going on in my head. I'm just not good at that. I'm Sydney.
And I'm Jake.
And you've been listening to 2 for the Matinee. It's not the worst movie. Leave the gun. Take the cannoli.